I request all participants to mute their audios so that we can have a smooth function. Except the panelists. The first case is a 34-year-old lady who initially was evaluated for, when she came to us, she was 34. And this was, I think, 3 years before that. She was initially evaluated for infertility. And during that part of that evaluation, she had a endometrial biopsy, and endometrial biopsy showed hyperplasia with atypia. And at this point of time, let me ask Beena madam. Madam, what will you do at this point of time? The patient is coming to you, you are treating her for infertility and you are getting a biopsy of atypia. What will you tell the patient? What will be your next step in managing her?
Of course, she being a case of PCOD and an nulliparous lady, BMI 28. So, though she doesn't have any family history of malignancy, she is a high-risk candidate for developing a malignancy in view of endometrial hyperplasia with atypia. So, since she is nulliparous, she wants to preserve her fertility. Now, our plan of management would be a conservative management, not like the standard treatment is hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy plus or minus pelvic lymphadenectomy. But that is not applicable in cases of fertility with the lady who wants fertility. So first of all, we would like to ask her to have lifestyle changes to reduce the risk factors like obesity. And then we would like to put her on progesterones like megestrol acetate, 160 to 320 milligram, or LNG IUS, whichever is preferable. So that is the line of management which I would consult with her. Like.
So before, so this lady also, she was put on progesterones by her treating doctor. And after 6 months, we are not sure which progesterone was taken. And after 6 months, we showed that there's a persistent endometrial hyperplasia. And she took progesterones for 3 more months at this point of time. So I'm just asking Dr. Fessy, but this report is showing endometrial hyperplasia only. There is no atypia when the follow-up biopsy was there. So at this point of time, could she have gone for an infertility treatment?
First thing is that a lot of people doesn't know the importance of endometrial hyperplasia and atypia. So so we have to specifically see whether the endometrium is thin, especially in the initial part of the period, and this suspicion must be there, because when I started infertility practice about 20 years back, at that time the incidence was less. Now the awareness is more, because more and more gynecologists are doing the scan. So they are more selectively monitoring, more than relying the radiologist just for the ultrasound picture, and more people are changing into the transvaginal sonography. So when we suspect endometrial thickness, especially in the initial part of the cycle, definitely we have to have this in mind, especially if we are going for a IVF, initial second or third day of the cycle. If endometrium is thick, but we definitely know there are a lot of options of, even if you go for IVF, we can say, frozen cycle, embryos can be frozen, oocyte can be frozen. So if there is this suspicion is there, we have to go for an hysteroscopy, and endometrial sampling has to be taken. Coming back to this particular patient, I think now if there is only endometrial hyperplasia, definitely we can continue the treatment for this patient. But if the endometrial hyperplasia with atypia is there, definitely we have to treat that particular patient. And I was discussing with Anupama also the other day. Now the incidence is more, maybe because we are more seeing the patients, or more specifically looking for hyperplasia with atypia. So that factor, I think pathologists can highlight into that aspect also.
Yes, we will definitely come to that. So this patient,
Anupama, one point. This patient already had a atypical hyperplasia report, but this patient, this follow-up report, persistent endometrial hyperplasia, that does not mean anything. So should we repeat the endometrial biopsy at this point of time before we go for IVF?
So we have to look at the response for treatment, right, madam? So we always, when we're starting progesterone treatments, we look for we do a repeat biopsy to see whether the lesion has regressed, stayed same, or progressed. Neeta, what is your opinion here, madam?
Actually, yes, ma'am. Because whenever you are giving conservative management, the patient should be ideally be counseled very well. And as madam rightly pointed out, the high risk factors should be. And apart from PCOS, and she's not on the obese at BMI is definitely less than 30, but she is hypothyroid. So that also we have to to be taken care of. And then like what they say is, because when you are planning fertility preservation with the intention of giving infertility treatment, so in that case your sampling period, especially in case of an atypical hyperplasia, it is not 6 months, it is every 3 months. And then if even with one sample with reversal or regression, you can go ahead with fertility or at least you have to
Treatment.
consult your fertility specialist at that point of time.
Madam, Madam, we have, I think, 4 or 5 patients. Anubama will be knowing those patients has been taking treatment with hyperplasia with atypia. And in fact, last month, one of the patient in the repeat sample after 6 months was still hyperplasia was there, again took the treatment, and then she conceived and she delivered last month. But there are still patients also which is not getting corrected with that and had to advise. But it is very difficult to convince them to undergo hysterectomy. So that is what the patient, if the persistence of that, we have to counsel properly about the malignancy risk. And that also we have one patient last year who had to be advised for hysterectomy because of persistence of atypia progressing to malignancy.
But this patient is actually regressed. Her atypia regressed. So, and she underwent treatment later. She underwent IVF with twice and failed. Then she underwent with surrogacy, and that also failed. Then she had a spontaneous conception that also resulted in an abortion. And in 2016, she's coming to see us with again atypical hyperplasia. Still desires fertility. She has multiple treatments. She has multiple repeated attempts at pregnancy, and now she's still desiring pregnancy.
All the studies, Anubama is telling that if the patient has got regression from the disease, the fertility treatment must be done as early as possible.
As early as possible.
Yeah.
So they tried. We don't exactly know the time frame, but she went for the infertility treatment. She tried some time, and then she failed, and now she is having a repeat, the reoccurrence of atypia. At this time, Dr. Fesi, what will you do? Do you start progesterones again? You'll send it to
yes, definitely. I think usually what we refer the patient to you. But if there is atypia is persisting, definitely, I think we have to continue the progesterone. And once it is regressed, we can always go for a collection of the oocyte, and if the repeat sample again is coming negative, we can collect the oocyte and freeze as an embryos and advise surrogacy for this patient. Because without only after the initial treatment phase, but it is better than pregnancy, because even with IVF stimulation, the estrogen values will be very high, but only even though it will be short period, may go up to 4,000 or 4,500. That is the thing we have to be careful. But it is better than pregnancy because the period is value is not very high and it is not persisting. So after progesterone treatment, we can go for an ovum pickup and freeze as embryo preservation. Success rate of thawing is very good, and also oocyte also thawing is good, but compared to the embryo is not as good as oocyte freezing. Either of the thing what we can do that.
Since she's married, we can go for embryo, right? We don't have to go for oocyte.
Embryo freezing can be done, and we can advise them surrogacy. Right now, we can do, with the modification of the surrogacy bill, we can do that, but only once the exact bill comes, whether what we can do. Initial surrogacy bill, when it was introduced, it was telling only altruistic surrogacy, that means commercial surrogacy was not allowed. We have to find their own close relatives for that, but there has been modification for the surrogacy bill. I think it will be passed in few months. It has been in the subject committee of the parliament.
Okay.
See, in this patient with the complex atypical hyperplasia, this is actually reoccurrence. So
Yes.
why can't we combine the progesterones with LNGIUS also? What is your experience?
So that is what I'll ask Neeta. So Neeta, what will you do? Dr. Fessy has seen the patient and is referring to you. What will you do next for this patient? She's come with an outside biopsy of atypical hyperplasia with a reoccurrence.
She should be counseled properly, and we have to reevaluate the patient also properly with slide review also, institutional slide reviews. And then in her case, you have to tell her that it is complex atypical, or now the term is more or less hyperplasia with atypia as per the latest WHO. And her chance of having malignancy in an hysterectomy specimen is around 40 to 43%.
So you think
And
she
also
can have a 40% chance of hidden
chance of,
malignancy?
yeah, and also even if it is just atypical hyperplasia and no hidden malignancy at present, her chance is around 28%, whereas in case of without atypia, it is only less than 1%. So this is not the standard of care. Conservative management is just because she is insisting on fertility preservation, and it is not a prolonged treatment also. At some point of time, since it has come back, because the progesterones, what all the guidelines says is, yes, if it is LNG-IUS, you can very well keep it for 5 years. But in her case, because of the fertility preservation, we cannot think of keeping it for 5 years continuously. And then coming to oral progesterogens, most of the studies say for 6 months. RCOG says for continuous, and ESGO and ACOG cyclical. So that is different. Anyway, everyone says about 6 months, or after that you may consider. But then even after 1 year, it is always with pinch of salt, and she should be counseled properly before.
So we have to tread very cautiously. So what
yes.
you're telling is,
and also if she,
cautiously
just because as madam rightly pointed out, she was on oral progesterone, the compliance of oral progesterone is very less, and so
yes, that is a real problem, because sometimes most of the patients may skip the doses.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
very
advantage
difficult.
of LNG is that you fit it and you forget it for the next 6 months because it will be there.
Yes.
I think we can combine now, and we can combine with both. Even if you are going for a short period, we can combine, I think.
Now, different studies in 2017 says that the response rate is better than progesterone alone. It's around 80 to 87% response rate is there when you combine systemic and local.
And you can combine GnRH agonist also, or metformin and LNG-IUS combination has also been in the literature.
GnRH agonist, the problem is it is very costly. That is the only problem. Otherwise, if you are planning for 6 months, I think we can combine, no problem with that. If somebody is worried about intrauterine device, we can combine with long-acting GnRH is there for 3 months, 3 cycle is there, 11.5.
But then
so
I
this
would
lady, when we can, yes, Neeta.
But then I would probably other than the long-acting one, especially we are dealing with. So if you are comfortable, okay, or why don't we try the monthly doses?
Okay.
So that so this patient we evaluated with an MRI and a slide review, as Neeta has suggested. And in MRI, Dr. Sandhya, madam, do you see anything suspicious in her MRI here?
The thing is, in endometrial hyperplasia, the endometrium should be thickened. And here I don't see that many thickness here. And the signal usually matches with that of the normal endometrium. Normal endometrium will have a very bright signal on T2. And for endometrial carcinoma, there should be a focal thickening and alteration in the signal. That is not evident in this. What you are seeing is a uniformly, there is no focal alteration in the thickness of the endometrium.
So you feel this is not a carcinoma? Yes.
The junction zone is intact.
Yes.
But the signal is slightly lower than the normal signal. I don't know.
Okay. Here also, do you see anything, her diffusion weighted?
Here, this focal area is showing some bright signal that looks slightly suspicious. But when you compare with the this thing, there is no focal alteration in the signal in the T2 weighted images at that area. So it is very difficult to comment with the diffusion alone. It has to be combined with the morphological image,
But you
T2
can
or
say that there is no frank carcinoma within this images.
yeah,
That
yeah,
is what we are
yeah.
looking. We are looking for myometric invasion, looking for frank
No, no,
carcinoma in case we have missed anything in sampling. Because
no.
we cannot sample in DNC. We are always worried that there is some part that we have missed. Is there a polyp that we have not taken out? Is there a point of invasion that we have not taken in for sampling?
No, no, it
So
is
we are not
showing a
seeing anything.
uniform signal. So,
So I think we'll feel confident with the MRI that you can go ahead with the management, right?
Anupam, I just want to ask one clear one, doctor. If the patient is diagnosed with hyperplasia with atypia after Megace treatment for 6 months, what is the next for a sampling which you advise? Whether you advise PIP alone or proper histoscopy with
what we do is a patient, now what our protocol is, a patient on progesterones. Our next sampling comes once the progesterone has stopped, patient has a withdrawal bleeding, and we take the sample in the next cycle when the patient, after at least 3 weeks after the withdrawal bleeding. And I take a DNC. Yeah.
DNC, proper DNC or just
DNC.
PIP?
Pipple tissue, if comes as inadequate, then it becomes a problem. I don't know after progesterone how much thicker endometrium would be. I used to take Pipple, but now I prefer a DNC because this is a good specimen. I need to make a definitive diagnosis whether I can send this patient back to you for treatment. So I think I do a DNC after that.
That is what a lot of the people always ask the same question. How do you follow up this patient? That's why I wanted to get an expert opinion from you.
So Indu madam, what do you say? How will you differentiate this? There is a lot of confusion about endometrial hyperplasia with ATPia now. Since classifications are changing and we are getting a lot of discrepancies from the slide review. Dr. Fessy also said that we have outside report coming as normal and our report says ATPia. So why do you think it is like that?
That is, many of the people I think are still following the 94 classification, which has a 4-tier classification. Architectural complexity is being taken into consideration. And now the 2014 WHO has changed it into the 2-tier. So it is actually easier for the pathologist from the pathologist's point of view. That is, can you show the previous slide, Anupama? Yeah, that is between now this is a case of hyperplasia with atypia, and this is without atypia. So if you see, there is crowding of glands. So the difference of opinion comes between a disordered proliferative endometrium, which is considered as a non-neoplastic, versus a hyperplasia. So now 2014 WHO has clearly stated that whenever you are seeing a crowding, then you can straight away call it as a hyperplastic endometrium. Okay, rather than disregarding it as a benign condition. So then we look at the cytological atypia. So when cytological atypia is present, then it is labeled as hyperplasia with atypia. So from the pathologist's point of view, I don't think with the 2-tier there is a confusion. But because many are still following the previous 94 classification, there is a difference of opinion coming. And now if you see this, you can see that with the 4-tier previous classification, the consensus was maybe less than 30% between the pathologists. And now with the 2-tier, it has come up to 80%. So that is the difference in opinion which comes when endometrial hyperplasia sample is done. I think I made it clear.
So the difference of opinion is because many pathologists are still following the older classification.
Yeah, and 2014 clearly states how the hyperplastic endometrium should be classified.
And again, now new WHO is coming, so it
has already come.
So we can expect some changes in the ATPia classification.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, Dr. Fessy, so we'll have to update in next 1 year what is going to happen with ATPia, whether it is going to increase or decrease. So this patient, how we treated was, I gave Megestrol acetate because I personally had bad experiences with LNG IUDs for 2 patients because the people were continuing to have spotting. So they were worried when I gave LNG IUCD. So that is why I went with Megestrol acetate in this patient. And this patient, it reverted back, and then the ATPia came back. So when the ATPia came back, we put her on GnRH analogs. But again, the patient was lost to follow-up. patient was not compliant in coming to us. She must have gone to another center for treatment. And then she is coming back to us with 2020 with a biopsy of endometrial carcinoma. And 1 year back, the last year, she had twins with surrogacy. So her fertility part was managed well. She had a womb pickup done hopefully somewhere, and she had twin pregnancy. But now her atypia at that time has progressed to endometrial carcinoma. And this is the MRI at this point of time. Sandhya madam, can you see anything abnormal when she is having in this MRI?
Yeah. Here you can see in this section, on this coronal section, that signal is very dark near the fundus. Yeah, this region. And that junctional zone is not very sharp. It is ill-defined. So it suggests a deep myometrial invasion also. There is a focal lesion there.
So there is something suspicious here. So this was the same area we had a signal
Diffusion
enhancement at the previous image also.
Yeah.
So at that time it must have been atypia which now progressed. So Neeta, is there any confusion in her management now? We'll
No, it's obviously she has children also, so we really don't have to.
so she went ahead. Yes.
And this would have been sometimes if the stimulation, I don't know, I cannot exactly tell, but usually stimulation must be done as we discussed after one course of progesterone, and otherwise during stimulation, that period of 1 month, the estrogen can rise up to 4,000, especially with IVF stimulation. So I don't know whether how far that would have been affected her progression of the disease. We don't know about that.
See, what is the stimulation protocol that you use for these patients, especially when after progesterones, we expect that the endometrial thickness is very low. So what would be your management on endometrium, and what is the stimulation protocol that you use?
No, if you are planning for embryo transfer in that patient, then you have to make sure endometrium comes up one cycle, and then only go for a long protocol. As far as possible, long protocol is
That you
better.
wait naturally, or you give some drugs or something like that?
We can give estrogen, but only thing better not to give. Better wait for natural endometrium is coming up or not. If it is not coming up only, then we have to give a trial of estrogen to see endometrium is coming up. Otherwise, exogenous estrogen is avoided as far as possible. But there is no much reason to wait too much, because anyhow during the stimulation estrogen will be very much elevated. So make sure endometrium is coming up, and then go for a long protocol with the GnRH analog. That will be the better in those patients.
How long would you be waiting? See, for example, this patient had a atypia which regressed. How long would you wait for her infertility to be managed, so that you say the enough is enough, now you have to go for definitive treatment?
No, definitely all the studies as we discussed, as the time gap between the treatment and the pregnancy must be shorter. So if the patient comes after if the endometrium is properly coming up in one cycle, next cycle we go for a ovulation induction if it is properly worked out patient, or if there is a borderline male factor or other factor, definitely go for an IVF counsel, and if patient can afford, we can go for IVF at the earliest, madam.
So the time is very crucial factor at this point of time.
Yeah,
we are treating her, and she has regressed now. It's very important that she go for pregnancy immediately.
No, at least after the surrogacy pregnancy, that person should have counseled her that she should have undergone a definitive treatment.
Maybe they would say before, see, because pregnancy was happening with surrogate. So she could have had at least a follow-up during that point of time.
Yeah, that's it.
But anyway, she was lucky enough because she is having a grade 1 tumor with a 1.2 centimeter with a no LVI, lymphovascular emboli, and minimal, less than 50% myometrial invasion, and she belongs to 1A. So this is a typical type 1 endometrial cancer which progressed from atypia to endometrial cancer over a period of time. So anything else to be done for her, Neeta? Can we leave her alone?
Yeah, she can, because she's low grade, so there's no need for any adjuvant treatment.
Low risk and
low risk, yeah.
So we'll leave her for observation.
1A, grade 1, 2, and type 1.
Type 1. Completely staged. So we'll leave her for observation. So I just want to summarize this discussion with about atypical hyperplasia in a young female deciding fertility. The ACOG committee opinion says that all these progesterone options are acceptable. You can give medroxyprogesterone acetate, you can give depomedroxyprogesterone, Magestrol, or LNG-IUS. All these are acceptable treatment options for the patients, which you can select depending upon your patient compliance and your personal experience or personal biases that you have. I think most of you will prefer the LNG-IUS system because of the patient does not have to take the tablets every day. Side effects are much better. So LNG-IUS is an acceptable system, as well as Magestrol acetate is also acceptable. And the concept which we follow here at Amrita, as well as endorsed by ESGO, is we are aiming for a therapeutic ablation in these cases. It is not to stabilize the disease. We have to ablate the disease. So for ablation, the best option is instead of giving the hormones continuously for over a period of time, there is need to be a cyclical withdrawal of hormones. So you give Megace for a short period, withdraw the Megace so that she's shedding the endometrium. Then you can re-challenge her with the hormones again. And when you're doing a biopsy to see the how the lesion has regressed, the ideal time to rebiopsy is 2 to 4 weeks following a withdrawal bleed. So that is what I'm following for the last 1.5 to 2 years. Before that, I used to give a continuous Megace. Continuous Megace and biopsy on Megace was my practice earlier, which I have shifted to cyclical Megace with stoppage, bleeding, and then biopsying them after the withdrawal bleeding. And I feel after this time, the effect is much more. The last 1.5 years, I'm seeing responses much better, and our pregnancy rates, or Dr. Fessy also said one patient has got pregnant. So the patients who are, the response is much better, and the patients are also getting effective pregnancies after this. And and there are some patients who come with atypia, but they don't want pregnancy immediately. And that is, I've faced this scenario once when the patient, because the patient treated for atypia because the husband was in another country and she could not go there, she could not get pregnant immediately. Husband could not take leave to come home also. In that case, we can continue a maintenance progesterone treatment for these responders.
Yeah, Anupama, I want to add one point. I had an experience few years back, that maybe 5-6 years back. One patient had this like this it was a thick endometrium, did the endometrial hysteroscopy, and it came as atypia. So we put her immediately within that result time 2 weeks with a UCD. But afterwards, since the patient had an immediate curettage and a UCD was put, patient, once it was taken out, patient started bleeding, but there was severe intrauterine adhesions. That is one problem what we can face if you do a curettage. And then we had to do two or three times hysteroscopy to correct the intrauterine adhesions. So that is one problem when we thoroughly do a curettage and immediately put a UCD. That is one problem which I've personally faced, and that was a doctor, and she was from Singapore. So she had to come repeatedly in every 6 months for that.
And this recurrent bleeding is also a real problem with those patients who are fitted with LNG-IUS.
Yes.
So sometimes we have to supplement those patients also with the cycles of progesterone.
Anupama, can I add something here?
Yes, ma'am.
As you said, after the withdrawal of progesterone, when you're taking the biopsy 2 to 4 weeks after, then that makes the pathology diagnosis also easier, because otherwise we see only progestational effect, and we won't be able to identify any pathology. So now it is easier to make a definite diagnosis.
So I don't do a thorough curettage. I don't believe in curating outside. I'm also worried about the synechia forming. So I do a regular curettage and make it thin and expect the hormones to work on that. And so hormones are ablating it. It's not our mechanical method that is going to scrape away the tumor. It's the hormones that is going to work and ablate the disease. And when I'm sending a patient back for fertility treatment, I always advise that if you're not getting pregnant within the next 6 months, you have to have a repeat biopsy and see whether you are having any problem also. And after childbearing is completed, a definitive option of hysterectomies are recommended. Ovaries can be preserved depending upon the age of the patient and whether she's at risk for Lynch syndrome or things like that. Otherwise, if she's not at risk of Lynch syndrome, ovaries can be preserved.
And salpingectomy should be considered.
Yes, definitely. The salpingectomy should be done. Should be not.
Yeah, it should be done.
Yeah. So I hope we can wind up our discussion about ATP and in an infertile patient. We'll go ahead with we'll rush through the case 2 because again case of atypia we'll have so we have finished with the radiology and the pathology parts. So this lady, 58-year-old lady, came with postmenopausal bleeding and she was evaluated by a doctor and she was found to have a complex hyperplasia with atypia. MRI was done, MRI junctional zone was normal. So she underwent surgery with the so gynecologist, how do you feel, Beena madam? What do you do in such a scenario?
Definitely surgery. Your
surgery.
Surgery is the treatment.
Surgery is a treatment.
Choice.
So,
Yes.
so surgery was done, and here we had a problem. Surgery is done. Now she is having an endometrial carcinoma with a grade 3 tumor sitting within her, but absolutely no myometrial invasion is there. No LV emboli. It's a small tumor, but it's still endometrial carcinoma grade 3. So what to do, Neeta, in such a scenario?
Actually, we usually don't see many cases like that because
Yes,
whenever
it is rare,
we get
yes.
it, either grade 1 becoming grade 2 or either way, but then becoming grade 3, it is like you will also be a bit confused what to do next. But then definitely when you go with the ESMO consensus, it is much easier because even before that, we used to do repeat staging. But then it was very difficult to convince a patient as well as where
So
the
now
patient is being
now
referred.
your concerns
But
are you don't have full information to treat the patient. You don't know if the
so
patient
it
is a node positive or not.
Yeah, so
Yes.
definitely before going in for a repeat surgery, we'll have to do the complete workup and we'll have to get the slides reviewed. All these have to be done. And again, you can consider IHC as well at this point of time because you are thinking of another step of management. But then when it becomes grade 3, it is not even intermediate, it becomes high intermediate. So the adjuvant treatment has clear-cut difference as per the latest guidelines.
So what is the difference in adjuvant treatment for a grade 3?
When it is grade 3, that is when it is high intermediate, if she is properly staged, you need to give only brachy.
You need to give only vault brachy. Yes.
Yeah, vault brachy to prevent vault recurrence. But then if she is not staged, she has to receive EBRT as well. So there is definitely a lot of risk involved because she is undergoing 2 modalities of treatment, not just surgery and VBT plus EBRT. So definitely I would prefer doing a staging.
So that is what we also discussed in tumor board because there is a grade 3 and if the nodal status can change the adjuvant management in her. We understood that if you do a node dissection and the node is negative, we can avoid external radiation. And at the same time, there is a chance that the node can be positive also. And if the node is positive, she needs chemotherapy. So there was definite evidence in this case that nodal status can change adjuvant management. So she underwent a complete nodal dissection. So I'm also very comfortable now doing a repeat staging since robotic surgery and previous surgery is laparoscopic. I could do a robotic completion staging for her. So the radiation oncologists are also relatively okay. Even if the patient needs EBRT, with a minimal invasive surgery, they are more comfortable giving radiation than an open surgery. At the same time, if she was an obese patient, I would have slightly hesitated going ahead with a resurgery. So that is one of the factors. Obese patient and a previous open surgery, I would have hesitated in going ahead with a completion staging. Anyway, for this patient, it is node is negative and she got only vault brachytherapy. So here ACOG again says that for a patient with atypical hyperplasia, when he's undergoing surgery, you always have to think that you can have a 40% chances that the patient could have a hidden malignancy. So don't do a morcellation, don't do a supracervical hysterectomy. These are not acceptable. You treat them, you always do surgery, keeping in mind that there is a chance that you can get a hidden malignancy within them. And sometimes I've seen patients, even older patients with atypia getting progesterone treatment with no, that also is not recommended for a patient who is having atypical hyperplasia and there is no desire to attain fertility. Until they're poor surgical candidates, they always should be offered surgery. And to avoid overtreatment, this is another step that we do. That is here the JINX was the lymph node assessment. We didn't have the lymph nodal parameters in hand to decide her adjuvant treatment. So there is more and more articles coming up whether we should do a sentinel node mapping in a patient with atypical hyperplasia. So that is what I do in a case of atypical hyperplasia. If I have any patient getting with atypical hyperplasia undergoing surgery, I would do, if it is robotic surgery, I definitely would do ICG sentinel node mapping. In open surgery, I would do a blue dye sentinel node mapping, but now the blue dye sentinel node mapping is less accurate than ICG mapping. And if I'm not getting a sentinel node, I'll send the uterus for frozen section to Indu madam to see whether there's any definite myometrial invasion. And if madam is telling this, there is some myometrial invasion, then I'll go ahead with the complete lymphadenectomy at that point in time in order to avoid a repeat surgery for that patient. So Neeta, what is your opinion? Should you go for a sentinel? Will you go for a sentinel node mapping if you're operating an atypia, or will you take the help of frozen section in atypical hyperplasias?
No, the problem is the where I'm working at present, I can do sentinel mapping with blue dye, but then I don't have the facility for frozen section at present.
I feel if you have the facility available, I think we should always
Obviously,
keep in mind.
Yeah, but then frozen is you cannot just fully rely on frozen. Like you should
But
always
the frank invasions can.
Yeah, that obviously be.
Or even you can do an intraoperative assessment. You can just cut open the specimen and see whether, no, that is also is possible.
We do it, yeah, but then literature says that's also not foolproof.
So cutting open is not something, again, that all has its own drawbacks, madam. So we all do whatever we can to make sure that the patient is not having a hidden malignancy within. So that is a point which I want to take across in this scenario. Atypical hyperplasia in an older lady, always think of malignancy, even if you're getting only atypia in your initial
always
stage.
better to think that it is stage 1 CA endometrium. That.
Because then there was one patient who created a huge ruckus in our gynec department because she was operated for atypia. And they all they got multiple calls from different parts. Why did you think of cancer? So it's a genuine patient might be having a genuine concern, but doctors are also tied because we should be using all our methods in hand to rule out malignancy.
Yeah, if we do unnecessarily lymphadenectomy and end up in
trouble, also a problem.
So, yeah,
that is also a problem.
Then they say without a malignancy you did that. So it's
So do whatever in hand to rule out. So I would go for a sentinel, and if sentinel is not available, I'll go for frozen. Or I would counsel the patient beforehand that you might be having a malignancy in some 40%, 50%, you can have a malignancy within, which you might know only when the final pathology comes. So that is some sort of
but then for
the counseling.
Since most of the audience are in the general gynecology group, I would say like even if we don't touch the lymph nodes, it's okay, because most probably we'll be getting the thing as 1A grade 1 or 2.
Yes.
But then
very rarely only you get the grade 3.
Yes. What is more important is tumor fragmentation should be avoided.
Yes.
Because the uterus should be removed intact. For that is the most important feature. Oncological principles should be adhered to.
So due to lack of time, I'll rush to the other next ovary scenario, and we can take the questions at the end. So this lady, it's a 21-year-old girl, regular periods. She was working as a staff nurse somewhere. She had a left ovarian cyst with few papillary projections, and she underwent all the tumor markers were normal, and the gynecologist did an open left ovarian cystectomy. Small incision was put and the cyst was drained without spillage. And the final histopathology was a borderline tumor, no surface involvement. And at that point of time, patient was well. And anything you need to do extra at this point of time, Neeta, are you happy with the management? You need any more information here?
Obviously, the workup part and the initial imaging, and actually for all ovarian cyst, my personal thing is, first I would like to have a USG and then tumor markers after that, and then decide on whether MRI. That's my, so I think Sandhya ma'am will be able to give us more insight on that.
So she has a few, we don't have the initial USG full detailed report. What we had was a few papillary projections. I think that is what might have made her open up this patient. I'm not sure. The thing is, after 7 months, she came with a recurrence with same side. And this is what we had at that point of time, MRI. at this point of time. And Sandhya madam, can you tell us what you're seeing at here?
For ovarian, this thing, ultrasound, as Neeta said, that is the primary modality,
Yes.
especially TVS, transvaginal. If the tumor is very large going into the abdomen, we'll go for a transabdominal. Then if you have any suspicion regarding the nature of the lesion, then we'll go for MRI. If you're very sure it is malignant, then you can go for a CT as a pre-op staging. So MRI in this case, it is showing a signal matching with that of the urinary bladder. You can see it's a
Yes.
involved cyst with a single locule inside, but there is a suspicious ill-defined like papillary thing is seen at one corner. So it can be benign bar borderline.
And Sandhya madam, one doubt, like we say for papillary less than 4 for the USG, something like that in the MRI.
There is a
The
grading
definite
system.
benign and malignant ones, like B rules and M rules.
Yes.
There is a RMI index calculated. That is all depending on the ultrasound scores only. In that, we'll see the size of the lesion, size of the solid tissue, then the number of papillary excrescence, any ascites. Based on this, we do a scoring.
Moreover,
Madam,
in
do you use RMI for scoring?
in the initial USG, what we usually do in such cases are, we always combine USG with the Doppler. So that papillary projections, if you see that there is high flow or low resistant flow, we do not do a hysterectomy. We do a salpingio-oophorectomy for that patient.
You don't do a cystectomy for this patient.
You don't do a cystectomy because cystectomy has got high rate of recurrences. If you suspect that there is malignancy, because a 21-year-old girl with normal tumor markers, why should she have a papillary projection? And if she's having a low resistant flow, she's a high risk candidate for developing malignancy. If you say the M rules, like according to the IOTA classification. So in such cases, we usually do a salpingio-oophorectomy, ovariotomy.
Yeah. In malignancy, you get that low resistance, high intratumoral flow.
But borderline, can you differentiate between borderline and malignancy with that flow, Doppler flow?
This borderline tumors always overlap with that of benign and malignant. That is the problem. You can clear-cut demarcate the malignant from benign, but the borderline is always a problem. It can sometimes come as a simple cyst also. In some cases, as few papilla. Even in benign, I have seen small papillary projections.
So benign, we have seen papillae with benign tumors, borderline tumors, and malignant tumors, especially
also.
low-grade malignant tumors present exactly the same as benign tumors.
Yeah. So borderline is always a problem.
Confusion. So this patient, she had a fertility sparing completion surgery. So what we do for borderline cases in young girls who require fertility is a staging surgery, including omentectomy and peritoneal biopsies, but preserving the opposite ovary and uterus intact. So this left side ovary was completely removed, omentectomy was done, biopsies was done, and it showed a serous borderline tumor with a micropapillary variant. So Indu madam, can you shed more light on this micropapillary variant? Is that why she's coming back again and again?
Yeah, Anupama, this is the usual papillary serous tumor, and this is a micropapillary that has a typical morphological appearance. And this micropapillary is said to occur in around 18% of serous borderline tumors, and it is said to have an aggressive behavior and and to cause an invasive implant in the peritoneum. So that is now even renamed by WHO as a non-invasive serous carcinoma or a low-grade non-invasive serous carcinoma when it shows the invasive implant in the peritoneum.
So that is one point I also wanted to make. That is,
identifying.
the invasive implant. The implant is a very big part of staging borderline tumors. We have to look for implants, document that there are no implants. And if you are seeing anything suspicious, any suspicious nodule, take that and send for biopsy because it could be an implant. If you see an invasive implant, then suddenly it is changing from borderline to a carcinoma.
Low-grade serous.
Yes. So this patient, she was kept on follow-up. So Neeta, you agree with this, right? We have staged the patient, her ovary is completely removed, but she's micropapillary. So what will you tell the patient about her marriage? She's 21, 22 now. She wants to get married. What will you tell her? Any special advice that you'll give her at this point of time?
Of course, she should be counseled properly, and she should be clearly told that it is not malignancy per se, but then that doesn't mean she cannot comply. She has to have a follow-up. And then the question would be whether she should be telling this to her husband's, because I had a case, and then I said it's always better, because why to have confusion? You can bring them to me, and we at that point we'll be able to counsel them in front of them. So counseling is very important, because
but your micropapillary pattern, does it worry you that she's going to recur in the other ovary?
But that doesn't mean we can, because now we have no invasive implants as such. We have done a completion staging also. So at this point of time, we cannot just alter our management just with this, especially she being a
yes, she's a
like
young girl. She's
nulliparous,
looking for marriage.
So obviously,
what? Yeah, I told her to get married fast and don't
that's
wait
obviously,
with,
and get
for
pregnant
conception.
fast.
Once she's getting married, don't wait for conception.
And Anupama, again here the role of egg freezing comes. I think
Yes.
abroad it is quite common. And here also, I did not get any patient like this, but I got one patient who got married and then divorced and planning to remarry after a few years. So meanwhile, she wanted to store her eggs for future use. The same thing can be that is, I mean, the recovery rate is very good and success rate is good. If they can afford, they can freeze their oocytes, and afterwards, after marriage, they can thaw it, take the husband's sperm and make it an embryo and transfer in the subsequent cycle. So that can be done, and it's not no extra cost than the IVF except for oocyte freezing.
So I totally agree with you, Dr. Fessy, because exactly 1 year later, they were looking for marriage, but nothing happened. And exactly 1 year later, she came back with another opposite ovary, a complex cyst with enhancing nodules. So now we are really, because now she had a alliance in place. She was getting married next month, and scan showed this. So she's coming and asking me what to do. So what do you tell Neeta at this point of time? Will you do surgery at this point of time, or will you wait, ask her to get married? There's a lot of confusions are there. And Sandhya Madam, about this image, what do you say about this image? Is it better or?
It is looking worse actually. You can see slightly thickened wall with few papilla. It's more evident. Yeah, that lot.
Papillas are more evident now. So you think it could be more than borderline, or it's definitely more than benign?
It's not benign anyway.
Yes. So this is what we see. So we have to intervene, right, Neeta? Is there any other point? Dr. Fessy, can you do a egg preservation with this cyst in situ?
No, that is the problem, is that when we stimulate again also, I mean, how many eggs we can get if the one ovary is not there, other ovaries have a cyst. If you don't see a normal ovarian tissue, we don't know how many eggs we can get. If there is normal ovarian tissue is there, definitely we can go for a random start protocol, retrieve the oocyte in the random start protocol. So, but the number of eggs we get with that protocol will be less, and it is not advisable for like this patient if you cannot get. But if you the scan, if you in the vaginal scan, if you can see the normal ovarian tissue where you can retrieve the oocytes, then it is worth trying. But I don't know whether how far the
access would be,
accessibility will be there, and how far the ovarian tumor will respond to that aspect. I don't know. I think.
So this patient also had a consult with with a fertility specialist at their place. So exactly this is what they told, that they said undergo your surgery, remove the cyst and come back to me. So we did a ovarian cystectomy, and it came as serous borderline tumor. And right now patient is undergoing fertility treatment. But Dr. Fessy, do you think how?
No, here also, if you can retrieve oocyte after this surgery, we must retrieve the oocyte, make it embryo, complete the surgery, and go for the treatment. But we must tell the patient that if you the success rate with IVF is always depending on how many cycles we can do each cycle, their success rate is limited. It is not 100%. We have to counsel them. And quite number of patients, if they are accepted, they go for a donor oocyte treatment also after that. Even if they, because that is better for a long-term survival of the patient, they can, in fact, another patient which did some from another center, both the ovaries had removed in 2 surgeries. They did donor oocyte treatment and delivered about 3-4 months back. So that also depends on, we have to give the options also. They must be knowing there is an option, so we can use suspense sperm and do the treatment. Yes, that patient.
The point I wanted to just make across in borderline tumors, what are the factors affecting recurrence? This is the data of 103 borderline tumors treated at our institute from 2010 to 2017. So these patients, as we saw earlier, the patients with micropapillary pattern, invasive implants, and microinvasion, they came back faster than other patients. And this Kaplan-Meier survival curves also shows that this first curve is for recurrence. You can see that the curves are all differing. I know it is a bit faint. You can see that the lines are differing. The topmost green line is the patients who undergone complete staging surgery. So when you have complete staging surgery, your chance of recurrence decreases compared to whether you have cystectomy. But the overall survival of the patient is not getting affected by what initial surgery you're having. Because even if you have an increased chance of recurrence when you're having a cystectomy or an incomplete staging, overall your survival rate is not affected in a borderline tumor due to that. So I think in a young girls who are having a serious borderline tumor, cystectomy is a viable option. You don't have to take the complete ovary out, especially sometimes you can see bilateral borderline ovarian tumors can also happen. So in that case, cystectomy is a very good option. But whereas mucinous borderline tumors are concerned, I'd say mucinous are more unilateral tumors. If you're seeing a tumor, mucinous looking tumor on one ovary, then I would not go for a cystectomy. I would go for an oophorectomy in that patient. Whereas it is serous, then I would still go for a cystectomy. So that is a point. So this patient might have multiple surgeries. So this girl who underwent 3 surgeries, she might have had multiple, her DFS, disease-free interval is shorter, but that might not affect her overall survival. She had the inconvenience of undergoing multiple surgeries, but her survival is, her life is not going to change, like she's not going to die early because of that. But what is important is the correct staging, finding out whether the patient had an invasive implant, whether the patient is having a microinvasion or an intraepithelial carcinoma. These are the things which are going to affect their survival. Just we'll quickly go through the case 4 in 5 minutes and then we'll take questions. So this patient was a 42-year-old lady. I just brought up this case because this lady with came with difficulty in passing urine. So we felt that something was obstructing her urinary bladder. She was not able to pass urine. And when we investigated, she found that she was having a mass occupying the pelvis. Sandhya madam, what do you say about this mass?
Here we can see that signal, no? The T1 weighted image. It is not like in a serous. In serous, it will be very dark. But here you can see the T1 image slightly bright. That means it's a thick fluid, like mucin, pus, blood. All those things will give the signal. Then the T2 weighted also some shading like picture is there. You can see like a stained glass.
Yes.
So this is a mucin tumor, but I don't see much papillary, means nodular.
Any suspicious features for borderline or malignant?
This can be benign bar borderline, mostly benign feature, because there are no solid nodules or anything.
Yes. So this is what a pre-op imaging showed. It's a mucinous tumor with probably benign features. Could be borderline maximum, but they are not seeing any suspicious features. So what would you do, Bina madam, in this scenario? She's a 42-year-old
lady.
Tumor markers are also normal, yes.
But she has completed family, and whether we would give her the option of preserving the uterus, that is the question that you have to ask. So if she wants to preserve the uterus, then you would go for a unilateral salpingioophorectomy. Otherwise, if she is not keen, she has completed family, she is not keen to preserve her uterus, then we'll go for a THLPS.
Would you, why BSO, madam? The other ovary is perfectly normal. Why do you want to do a BSO?
Maybe we'll preserve that ovary. But of course, bilateral self-injectable.
Will you do an open surgery or a MIS?
No, of course, MIS is preferable, but in our setup, we'll go for an open surgery.
Neeta, any other opinion? You completely agree with the plan?
Yes, as Madam said, in a large one, even my preference also would be to, especially she is a Paris lady, my preference also would be for an open one, because whichever is the route, what is more important is to get it removed intact. Like,
that is the reason.
Spillage should be avoided at any cost.
Because MIS also, we need a surgeon who has got enough experience to put it in the endo bag, and without spillage, we have to remove it. That is a
for smaller tumors, everyone will be comfortable, but with larger tumors, the issue of spillage comes.
So she is 11. So this lady, if it coming to me, mucinous, I'm always concerned about MIS and mucinous because of certain. It's not about evidence.
But then,
some certain anecdotal experiences from other scenarios where any spill in mucinous, I'm worried. Benign, borderline, or malignant. Any spill in mucinous,
in mucinous, your initial surgery matters a lot, because chemo cannot
unlike
do
serous,
much.
unlike serous, in mucinous, it's very important that you should not spill. Even if there are no malignant features, your tumor markers are normal, you should remove it intact. That's the most important thing. So it is 11 centimeter. You can bag it and take it out with an incision. Yes, but don't aspirate or spill the contents. So this lady underwent a left salpingo oophorectomy, and specimen was retrieved through the port endo bag without spillage, but again aspirated. That is something which I don't know, because always we say that we are aspirating within the endo bag, there is no spillage. But in case any accidental spillage occurs, we don't know which patient is going to come back with a pseudomyxoma. That is something which I completely avoid. But this, even though there were no features, intraoperative frozen showed a complex architecture and could not exclude carcinoma. Sindhu madam, what is your take on mucinous tumors and frozen?
Yeah, Anupama, I would say that mucinous is the most difficult one to give a definite diagnosis on frozen. To diagnose a benign is okay, but a borderline versus a carcinoma, it's the most difficult scenario. Because of the abundance of the mucinous material. That is one thing. Even if we say that we can see a solid nodule when we cut open the cyst, most of the solid nodule will be composed of this mucinous material, and to get a solid cellular area during frozen is a very difficult process. And even on a permanent diagnosis, they say that to differentiate or to exclude a carcinoma in a borderline, you need to sample at least 2 sections per centimeter of the tumor. So so much of sections you need to look into to exclude a carcinoma. So you can, so on a frozen, it is too difficult to exclude a carcinoma, especially when there is a solid area.
So that is the difficulty which I face now when I have a mucinous tumor and I send to Indu madam for sectioning. I always have it in mind that it's tough on her to report. It's very tough for the pathologist to comment, and so you have to take decision based on the clinical features. So when I'm operating a young patient with mucinous tumor, I always do a conservative surgery and tell them if it is malignancy, you would require a completion staging later on. And if it is an older patient, I take a consent for a complete surgery in case any atypia is there, or I again suggest a 2-stage surgery. It's a consent because a patient should not come back and tell us, see, you did not tell that this could be malignant. You had every facility available, but still you could not find out a malignancy in such a scenario. So final pathology report was mucinous carcinoma. So, such an innocuous looking mucinous cyst on MRI, and the final pathology was a carcinoma ovary. At this point of time, I would like to take some time to thank Sandhya madam. Sandhya madam she's having another meeting at this point of time. Thank you, madam, for attending.
Yeah.
Madam,
thank you, Anupama.
Thank you, madam. So you can leave, madam. We'll take 5 to 10 minutes more. Whenever your next meeting starts, you can leave, madam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Neeta, at this point of time, what do you do? The report has come as mucinous carcinoma ovary.
So mucinous carcinoma ovary, you should, the first and foremost important thing is you should always rule out GI primary.
Yes.
So you have to go through the workup once again. And then see the latest NCCN guidelines, apart from CEA and GI, both OGD scopy and colonoscopy, specifies to do CA 99 as well.
Yes.
So because we will be dealing with
Primary somewhere
else, and it's unnecessary. So the initial workup, especially now that initial surgery is over, that workup part is quite crucial.
That is, I totally agree with you. Always when you see a mucinous ovarian tumor, you have to think, even if it is benign, we tend to look at them with suspicion and go for a GI evaluation sometimes, because many a times we have seen that they come back with problems.
Mucinous is always a bit tricky. Yeah.
It's a very tricky
No,
tumor.
when we get such a big mucinous adenoma, choriocarcinoma, we usually combine it with appendicectomy also.
So, that is what is the current role of appendicectomy? Neeta, you want to comment on appendicectomy?
Actually, now, as per the guidelines, before it was for all the mucinous carcinomas we used to do, and even now I continue to do appendicectomy for all the mucinous ones. But the guidelines now, there is a change. If it is primary from the ovary, need not be. But then
it's always important to inspect the appendix.
Yeah, but
and
then
if normal, leave it alone. Say, you don't know whether you're missing a microscopic carcinoma. So recently we have stopped appendicectomy. I think the last couple of years we have not.
The guidelines no more recommend that. But then in such a case, especially when you have a mucinous carcinoma report prior to the second surgery, I would have, I don't know, even though guidelines doesn't have no evidence as such.
Anupama?
Yes, madam.
Would you expect another primary if there is extra ovarian spread? Is there anything like that? If there is extra ovarian spread or a mental involvement, then should you consider appendix or colon?
So we don't have recommendations like that, madam. When extra ovarian spread, the patient is going to come with a high CEA. High CEA with a tumor. And if any patient coming with high CEA will receive an OGD colonoscopy before surgery. So the patient would have ruled out upper GI primary. Then the sites left are gallbladder and appendix. After a GI endoscopies are ruling out, then you have gallbladder and appendix, which you are not being sampled. So but these two areas we will see. In CT, in CT you can see the gallbladder.
Okay. Because upper primaries can be present in gallbladder.
Yes. So that is something which I look, and then I look at the appendix intraop. So in such a scenario, I might remove the appendix also. Sometimes we have seen that there is a small invasive infiltrative tumor within the appendix, and you will label it as DPAM with so it's a totally different. If we start discussion on that, I think we will not finish today. So there's a point I want to take across is in a mucinous tumor, you cannot differentiate benign, borderline, or malignant preoperative.
It's very difficult.
Very difficult. But intact removal of a mucinous tumor is very important. Yes, and in case you are suspecting a mucinous tumor and malignancy, always rule out GI primary. Any point that you want to convey, Neeta, because we have questions from the audience.
Madam, have you seen any pseudomyxoma case occurring? Because I have seen one case.
Actually, we had a case years ago, elderly patient when we operated, and that patient had a normal CA, unidentified normal CEA, and when we opened her up, it was bilateral ovarian. We did a THBSO, but she had peritoneal implants, and we meticulously, at that time oncosurgeon was not there, we meticulously removed all the peritoneal implants and did an omentectomy. But this patient, again, she had a borderline mucinous tumor, but this patient again had a recurrence, and she was referred to RCC, and she's on treat now. But I think it is almost 10 years, but she's living, but in between she's getting some abdominal discomfort and some chemotherapy, but she's pulling on.
No, I'm asking.
Had a case, but that is.
No, because a lot of people are doing laparoscopy surgery, so.
Dr. Fessy, I'll tell you one patient. So this girl was a 23-year-old girl. She underwent a lap cystectomy 3 years back. her family friend. The gynecologist was a family friend. It was looking like a benign mucinous tumor. So cystectomy done. Spillage was there. Final report also came as benign mucinous tumor. And 3 years later, this girl was referred because she is having some abdominal distension and shoulder pain. And when I saw her, her abdomen was full with mucin. The first slides is not available. It was reported as benign tumor. Now there was no space within her abdomen. It is fully pseudomyxoma peritoneum, and unfortunately that girl died. So a 23-year-old young girl. Possibly it could be due to an intraoperative upgradation. We don't know.
Neeta, what would you do if you get such a patient? Suppose after cystectomy and there's an external spillage and you get pseudomyxoma all over the abdomen. How do you manage?
Madam, actually, it is very difficult, and
because that is a problem. That is the real problem, because in young people, like Anupama said, 21, 22-year-old girls coming with this problem. And
you can't manage
can
pseudomyxoma,
always refer to a gynec-oncologist, but what
pseudomyxoma, it should not happen. Like accidental spillage should not happen for a mucinous.
When
anything is saying mucinous, no spillage.
Then, I mean, with the dermoid also, sometimes irritation, dermoid materials also.
Yeah, that peritonitis, chemical peritonitis. But this is
washing. We take time and wash and remove even small hair.
That's very difficult, because if you see the hair will stuck to the peritoneum and bowels, and it's almost impossible to remove all the hair if you spill it. That's very difficult.
Shaili madam, can you add your experience, anything?
No, when it's really big, I usually go with a small incision. So this spillage and
laparoscopy. When you are doing laparoscopy?
No, I'll assess beforehand. Depending on the size, I will decide whether to go for a laparoscopy or open. If it is open also with a very small incision, we can take it out without much spillage. And most of the time, we are able to preserve the ovary, part of it, when it is in young girls. So it's very important. When we remove the ovary, the whole family is affected by that. If you are able to preserve part of the ovary, then it is good for her future also.
So what I do is that if there is dermoid, we assess in the scan whether the normal ovarian tissue is there, and then plan accordingly. If there is whether one ovary is normal and if this totally normal ovarian tissue is not there, better to depending on the case, we have to decide whether to go for ovariotomy or cystectomy in that patient.
But see, when whatever large is the dermoids, you can always do a cystectomy.
Correct.
Because once the ovary regresses, you will have enough ovarian tissue for ovulation.
No, only thing, when you do the lap surgery, you have to be careful.
Lap surgery, it will be a problem.
Yes.
But dermoid, mucinous, I don't recommend.
No, mucinous, we don't do a cystectomy in mucinous. But of course, serous and dermoids, you can do a cystectomy without rupturing. You should take it out as a ball.
Yes, totally agree. Indu madam, this question you want to take there's a question like if you're doing with Mirena, there is no option for withdrawal. So biopsy is a progestation effect. So that means, is it masking an atypia or?
When a biopsy is the question complete?
So can you see the question on screen? No.
Just a minute.
No. So the question is, can progestation effect mask an underlying atypia or carcinoma?
Yeah, that is what. That is whatever underlying pathology is there. If the biopsy is taken on progesterone, we will just see the progestational effect only. That is why the current protocol is very good for the patient. That is, after the progesterone withdrawal, you are taking the biopsy 2 to 4 weeks after. So if it is a complete reversal, you will still see a normal endometrium. And if hyperplasia or carcinoma is persisting and not reversed, then you will be able to see what the underlying pathology is. So it is always better to take when the patient is not on progesterone. Otherwise, it can mask.
Yes. So in a Mirena, in that scenario, Mirena, you will have to remove the Mirena and then take a biopsy if there is, to see that there is no underlying atypia remaining.
subsequent cycles if it develops.
Infertility patient on Mirena, right? And there's a question whether double Mirena is advisable. Anybody has experience with double Mirena?
They say for especially
Double the
for
dose of
1A conservative management for 1A there are
Reports of
haven't
double
used it, yeah,
Reports are there.
How is it actually?
Mirena, but not for
But then-
Put
ATPI.
in one and then you put in another
put
one.
one more, but then to insert one itself is not that easy
Yeah.
thing. So I haven't used it.
But ATP, I think the dose should be okay. The 1 Mirena dose should be okay if it is not carcinoma, right? I have not done. One also is very rare for me, so double Mirena I have never done.
They,
Focal ATP, the question is, what is focal ATP? What do you suggest for focal ATP management? So is there any difference between focal ATP and ATP, Indu madam?
Yeah.
ATP is ATP, right?
Yeah.
yeah, but then when we do repeat sampling, we will have to do hysteroscopy as well because there is only a focus. So if we do a PPLA, we
not
might
miss
miss
it.
it. Yeah.
But pathologically,
Question
it is
whether dermoid is there, no? Young patient, nulliparous lady with dermoids with CA1, CA elevated. Can she proceed with cystectomy?
so the question about when you're talking about dermoid, always one thing which is confused with dermoid tumor is malignant ovarian germ cell tumor. So malignant ovarian germ cell tumor can sometimes people have mistaken for a dermoid. Immature teratomatous element in a
Yes.
malignant ovarian germ cell tumor has been missed.
So in the imaging
There are two
itself,
patients whom I know where initial biopsy report was a benign dermoid, and finally they've come with a recurrence. They've come with a recurrence, and the recurrence shows immature teratomatous element. So that is the only thing which I think you have to take care in a dermoid.
yeah,
Do the
and
tumor markers. Even a young girl with dermoid, do the tumor markers. Immature teratoma, definitely the tumor markers will show a change.
and also in the imaging USG, you have to do Doppler. All these Rokitansky nodules, the vascularity will be
Yes.
increased.
And always tumor markers for all the germ cell
Germ
tumors
cell
also
tumor.
should be done in all young patients with
Yeah, less than 40. Yeah.
Yes, all young patients with dermoid. There's a question where what incision you prefer for open surgery, transverse or vertical for borderline, probable borderline tumor?
Definitely
If you
vertical.
midline,
Vertical.
no doubt.
Because there is no probable borderline tumor. If you're
Like,
sending
if
it for
it's-
frozen,
yeah.
it can come back as a malignancy.
Vertical. Because you get the
Midline.
tumor intact with the vertical. So you
And
can
staging also.
extend the inside. Yeah, you can the staging also. You can see all the intra-abdominal organs systematically, see the peritoneum, subabdominal, everywhere. So midline, there's no other choice.
There is a question about serous borderline tumor ruptured accidentally intraoperatively. Underwent TLH, DSO, and omentectomy and PLND in the same surgery. Does she need anything more? What do you say, Nita?
Where is it? I cannot see the question. Can you repeat it?
Question.
Sorry.
Again, I don't know why I'm screen sharing, but it is not seen.
It's all right. Yeah. It is. The
So
voice
if you
is
click
breaking.
the question answer above, the
It's all
serous
right.
borderline tumor.
Okay. It's just serous borderline tumor, so you have to complete the staging. And
So
if
PLND,
there is
is
no
it enough, or you want a para-aortic node dissection, or do you need a node dissection at all?
actually, staging per se is always, because we don't know whether you are dealing with a borderline or a low-grade malignancy or a high-grade serous. So what I would do is, especially since I don't have a facility for frozen section, and all the cases will be either, it will be a complex one, not a simple one. So obviously my choice is always a midline vertical, and then I will do para-aortic for all the, because all my staging will be for suspicious tumors. So there is no, you cannot omit para-aortic. And for unilateral, you may do a unilateral pelvic lymph node, but then para-aortic node, yes, it is to be done. That's what I do.
I rely on my
That's
frozen, I rely on Indu madam's frozen report. So if madam says
lucky.
it's borderline, then I would omit lymphadenectomy for that patient. I would do omentectomy, I would do peritoneal staging, but I would not do a nodal staging for such a patient.
I
Because,
Madam is on leave, then
I
it's a
hope
different
I
issue.
haven't disappointed you.
No,
Anupama,
madam, no,
so far.
no. Only if you take leave. They have a case when you're on leave, then I'll be having trouble. And with LNG IUS repeat biopsy, is it by PIPEL? That is one question.
Yeah,
You can take a
guidelines
PIPEL
say
biopsy with LNG,
guidelines
yes.
say you can leave the LNJ IUCD in situ and take a office endometrial sampling. So per se, you cannot ask for a removal because it is not cost effective also.
And the role of injectable progesterone.
They say injectable DMPAs
Can be
150 mg.
Can be given. Any experience with injectable progesterones for ATP? I have not used.
No, we
No.
also have not come across.
So anyway, recommendation ACOG recommends injectable progesterone also. So I think you can be given. It can be given. So there is a question here. A young patient with previous torsion of ovary with dermoid cyst underwent oophorectomy, later developed high-grade germ cell tumor in the opposite ovary during pregnancy. Not properly staged. She's coming after taking chemo. What will be the fertility and next management? So
when was the surgery done? It is.
I am not sure. It is not sure when the surgery was done. But anyway, germ cell tumor, you can have a, there is no contraindication to fertility again if it is, you can completely stage. If it is in the opposite ovary, then that ovary will have to go, right? Because one ovary is removed and the other ovary developed tumor, then the ovary will have to go.
Otherwise, if one ovary is removed, we can go forward with a try normally afterwards.
Yes, if she had only one, the other ovary was normal, and that ovary can be left alone, and she can go for a normal pregnancy and fertility. No issue.
And depending on the dermoid ovary, if it is cystectomy is done and germ cell ovary is removed, the further treatment depends on the ovarian reserve. If the ovarian reserve is less, then we have to go for an ovarian stimulation at the earliest. Otherwise, we can wait. That depends on the ovarian reserve of the cystectomy, dermoid cystectomy ovary.
Any other question? I think we have covered most of the questions.
Sanam ma'am is asking about IHCs in ovarian.
Yes,
yeah, to Indu ma'am.
Indu madam.
Yeah. I think only CK7 and CK20 are helpful. Rest of all the markers will be negative when it is mucinous ovary, and CK7 positivity more than CK20 suggests a primary ovarian, whereas it is vice versa. That is CK20 more over CK7 suggests a colonic or an appendiceal primary. That we have found it useful.
Yes, in mucinous. Any borderline ovarian tumors? Otherwise, serous we don't usually do IHCs, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But mucinous, to differentiate from other the other ovarian markers like ERPR and WT1, all will be negative in mucinous. So those markers won't be helpful in mucinous tumors.
Sanam has also asked another question: simple hyperplasia prior to IVF, how long to treat? Actually, if there is no atypia, I think we no need to treat. We can go ahead with the treatment.
You can go ahead with the infertility treatment.
There's another question. What can be done if mucinous tumor accidentally ruptures during surgery?
What do you do, madam, if it ruptures?
Actually, we give petrol wash with 5% dextrose. We copiously wash it with 5% dextrose till it becomes clear.
That's what in case of accidental, but usually mucinous, the advantage is mucinous tumors are usually not very adherent. They will be free tumors.
Yeah,
but then if your incision is not adequate,
they rupture only when your incision is
very important, because most of the people are very reluctant to extend your incision above the level of the umbilicus. So that is not the case. So if it's a very large tumor, you have to extend the incision even up to CP sternum so that you can remove it intact.
So I think we have answered the questions. Thank you all for a lively discussion. It was a very interactive and enjoyed during the session. I hope the attendees also enjoyed the session. Over to the chairpersons.
I think, Anupama, that was an excellent presentation. I have to congratulate each one of you for the participation, information, everything that is given to us. It has really kept us, with full attention to listen to you. So, but what I understood is, every surgery, I think we have to counsel the patient very nicely. Always expect that there can be surprises when the histopathology report comes. And this is the lesson I learned, that every case, you should never think that it is going to be a benign and go ahead. Always tell them it can be a malignant and a resurgery is possible. So anyway, that was an excellent thing. And my co-chair people have any questions? Do they have? Sheila and Dr. Lisamma? So if they don't have any questions, shall I wind up the session by thanking our Dr. Anupama, Dr. Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences for organizing this webinar, and also thank each and every one of you, the panelists, like Dr. Beena Kumari, Dr. Fessi, Dr. Neeta Sridharan, Dr. Indu B. Nair, and Dr. Sandhya for the excellent presentation and the participation. And this will not be complete if I don't thank Vineet, who has organized this system. So it would not have been possible without his cooperation. I thank him also. Hope all of you have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Anupama.
madam.
I would like
Thank
to
you.
thank you very much for inviting me for this very lively session, and very good to see all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
madam.
you, Anupama. We had a very
Anupama.
good discussion, and we learned a lot.
Anupama and me are Beena Madam students.
Yes.
Thank you
Beena.
very much.
And Beena madam is looking younger and younger. It's what, when I see her, I feel she's now.
Oh, thanks for the compliment. Okay, bye.
Okay, madam. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.